Well, good evening, guys. Hope you're doing well. You're probably expecting Brett Pitman to be on the other screen tonight, but we've probably got a better looking one. Neil Meldrum, how are you, mate?
I'm good. Better Barnett, definitely.
Yeah, much better Barnett. So, of course, Neil, we've had you on before as the ex-editor of the Daily Echo. How have you been doing for the last 2.5 months? Because you're freelance like I am, aren't you?
Yeah, so fair to say things have changed quite a bit, actually, work-wise, even since the last time I was on. So yeah, things are looking a lot more positive from that point of view. I think last time I was on, we weren't long into lockdown, were we? So I think we were all kind of a little bit unsure. Jeff was sort of feeling the same, but no, things are looking a little bit brighter now, a bit more light at the end of the tunnel, business-wise, and obviously for family reasons and things like that. It's looking like we might get an opportunity to actually go and see people for the first time in 9 or 10 weeks. So,
well,
fingers crossed.
If people like Dominic Cummings can, we all can, surely.
Okay.
But
don't get me started on that.
That's another debate in itself.
Yeah.
Right. So tonight's show is a little bit different. Of course, Brett Pitman, if you're tuning in expecting to see him, he's on tomorrow night now. Same place, YouTube and also Facebook. This is just exclusively on YouTube tonight. But yeah, really looking forward to speaking to him. And I might be able to get a bit out of Neil about interview techniques and the best way to extract information from players like Brett later on in the show. But it's an open panel tonight, so fans can drop in and drop out whenever you want, and this is the link you need if you want to take part. Here we go. This could be disastrous, but it's afcbpodcast.com/panel. You'll need some headphones or some earphones at least, just to not have the feedback. But yeah, we'd be really interested in having you on, and we want to talk about all the latest stories going on, not least with the coronavirus, Project Restart, AFC Bournemouth injuries, transfer stuff, all that. But if you want to take part yourself, get yourself on camera. afcbpodcast.com/panel. So just dropped in. We've got Tony off the podcast. Mr. Tigz, how are you?
Hey, I'm all right, mate. This morning, I almost wasn't going to come on the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was having problems with my eyes, but apparently a little drive out to Corfe Castle, and now I feel fine. So I'm going to crack on with it, if that's all right.
Yeah, no worries at all. Oh, also, Paul is here as well. Paul Kenward. Hello, Paul.
Hello. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Is that a makeshift studio you got going on? I'm quite liking it.
It is my wardrobe with a flag and some shirts.
Yeah.
I thought you were in the away dressing room there for a minute.
Yeah, could be.
So we'll start by talking about yesterday on AFCBTV. Or was it Saturday now? Or no, Sunday? I can't remember. The days are just rolling into one. I think it was yesterday where they played the Lincoln match from 2003, the playoff final. I'm sure you guys went to it. Could you remember much about the game itself? Because I must admit, a lot of it skipped my mind.
I remember quite a lot of it. I went on the Cherry Choo Choo, I think it was branded at the time. It was a chartered train from Bournemouth direct to Cardiff, and there were some fun times on that train, especially on the way home. Although we didn't get to spend much time in Cardiff, it was just a brilliant atmosphere on the way up there. I think there were a couple of times where the train had to stop to let actual passenger trains go past, paying sort of trains go past. But it was just a fantastic day out, from early in the morning all the way through to the evening when we got home. May have been a bit drunk.
Yeah, what were your memories of that, Tony?
I sort of similar to Paul. I'm a bit hazy. I think I got the coach up and was in the walkabout for quite a long period of time. I remember thinking, because obviously at the time there were lots of playoff games going on, playoff finals that weekend, and ours was the first one, I think. Yeah. And so not only were there Bournemouth fans, there were fans of lots of different clubs all there at the same time. But it did feel like a party atmosphere all the way through. And I remember in the stadium there were balloons, and there was a massive pre-match thing. Was it Jane Middlemas? Someone like that, like a TV presenter on there. And obviously, but I do remember the goals and the incredible goals they were. And there in the middle there, Mr. Carl Fletcher, he was my captain. I think he was brilliant for us. And went on to great success, didn't he? West Ham and bit for Wales.
There's always been conversations about who our most famous fan is, and Jane Middlemas always got a mention. We've probably got more, famous fans there now, but obviously, Neil, for the Echo, you covered many highs and lows. That was in the early time of your career at the Echo, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't go actually. So it was, from what I remember, obviously a long time ago now. I'd only been at the paper for a year, and then I was kind of early 20s, straight out of university. So I was sub-editing sort of WI and TG nibs and things like that on the columns. That's all they would let me loose on back then. But I do remember that Neil Butterworth, who was the editor at the time, kind of selected a few people from the news team. Obviously, all the sports boys were there, goes without saying. But he selected a few people from the news team to go up on the coach. And I didn't make the cut, unfortunately. So I was stuck in the office. But so my memories of it are a little bit hazy. Obviously, I remember the goals and the kind of key moments. But it was very, very early on in my time sort of watching Bournemouth. I mean, I'm interested to know sort of where the boys think that team kind of ranks really with the teams that I'm more familiar with over the last kind of 10 years or so.
Well, it'd be interesting to ask, because I think I saw a tweet earlier from Alex Deutsch, who seems to get a mention on the show every time we do one. But I think he said that Wade Elliott was his standout player at the time. And he said, he could walk into the side if he had the same form as he had then. He could perhaps walk into the current side. But what are your thoughts on comparing the squads?
I think Wade was incredible. I mean, yeah, he probably could. He definitely could have he did make the step up to the Championship, didn't he? And he did really well for Burnley. Gareth O'Connor had that purple patch for us, didn't he? And he looked like he could be, an absolute world beater. I really liked him. But when he came back to the club, it wasn't quite the same for him, I don't think. So the longevity of him maybe wouldn't have. But then you look at some of the subs who came on and the people on the bench, like Brian Stock, he did great. Was Scott McDonald in that squad, but didn't get on the pitch?
Yeah, he might have been. Yeah, that's right.
Who obviously went on to great success in north of the border. So, I think they were an incredible squad. We could have kept them together, Burnley and such. If we could have kept them together, who knows? Who knows what O'Driscoll could have done?
So that was one of the high moments. And as I said on the show recently, we've always had some kind of moment sort of every decade or so. So in the sort of 90s, it was Wembley. We had that in the 2000s, obviously minus 17 as well. Promotion to the Premier League. And then, this decade has started off pretty weird, we've got to say. How are you feeling with regards to the lack of football at the moment, Paul? It's horrendous, isn't it?
I am struggling a little bit. Yeah, I must be honest. I thought it would be easier than it is, because every season we have the post-season and the pre-season, and this has kind of felt a little bit like a post-season and a pre-season in one, but we still haven't finished the season, so I don't know whether we're actually going to get to see much more football. It sounds like we are. I'm disappointed that I can't be there to watch it if they do. I just think the problem with having games behind closed doors is you just don't get the atmosphere from the fans. Even if you're watching on TV, the games are a bit soulless, and it's hard to watch.
Yeah, agreed. So just before we come over to Neil, we've got our first person in, who is, let's roll the roulette. We've got Craig Beazley. Craig, how are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Sam.
How have you been dealing with everything that's going on recently? You missing the football?
Oh, crikey, yes, most definitely.
It's not great, is it? So, Neil, to talk about how on earth we're going to restart, it seems that null and void is completely off the table at the moment. And, we are going for a restart, but there are several different phases that need to be sort of completed. So we're at stage 1, and then stage 2 needs to be put into place. And then hopefully stage 3 will be, the actual playing of the games. What's your understanding of what's going on at the moment?
Yeah, I know as much as you guys, to be honest. It's all very strange. It's been a very, very strange period to what the guys alluded to there, really. I sort of mentioned when I came on before, I'm more of a fan now again than what I was. So I'm starting to kind of feel it a little bit. Whereas, when you're at the paper, you don't really watch games as a fan. But now that I am again, it hurts a little bit, not having games to watch. It's all very strange. I think there's a lot of confusion around the restart and the kind of measures that need to be put into place in the same way that there are for workplaces and shops and everything else. I think nobody really knows. We're kind of just making it up as we go along, all of us, aren't we? So particularly the guys at the top in number 10. So
yeah, and
it does seem Sorry, it does seem strange that we are told to carry on working from home, yet footballers can go and sort of hug each other and high five each other and be in close contact with 5 of them at a time in training. It just all seems very odd. It's almost like driven by money, I think. But...
You don't say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's unquestionably coming into it, and when you're talking about the figures of cash that are involved, I wouldn't want to be the person making the decisions, put it that way, with that kind of money at stake.
One of my biggest concerns, especially, is, say, for example, because you've got players play, and I understand the second stage, they're going to be doing that in groups of 3 or 4. What if one of those players tests positive? Do all 4 of those then need to self-isolate? What happens if it's a couple of groups? Therefore, teams will be heavily disadvantaged.
I think they're trying to get around it by testing regularly. So if one of the group look like that, they have tested positive, then they just test the others, and if they have tested negative, then I think the idea is that they will come back to training. But I mean, that's caused a bit of a furore in that the Premier League have gone out and sourced their own testing, which is they're paying for. It's nothing to do with the government testing, apparently. But of course, right when the country needs more testing, the Premier League are able to get it.
Yeah, well, there's been an AFC Bournemouth player that is these 2 photos are not necessarily linked. However, there's obviously been an AFC Bournemouth player that has contracted it, and it's quite interesting that 2 players out of however many that were tested have been confirmed as being positive with coronavirus. Yet, Bournemouth admitted that they had a player, whereas the other team we're not quite sure of. I just wonder what the thinking is of some clubs thinking it's information that should be released, and others thinking not so much.
Neil will probably know better than I do. I suppose if there's a chance that someone's got a sniff that it might be somebody at Bournemouth, maybe they would release it first before somebody asked the question. Does that ever happen in the newspaper game, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way the media team is run and has been run for a number of years now at Bournemouth, they like to get on top of stuff early and control the narrative, really. They're really experienced guys in there now, and it's down to each club, I guess, how they want to deal with things like that. You're going to get clubs that want to stay silent and pull the shutters up, and then you'll get clubs like Bournemouth that are a little bit more open about it. Personally, I think they're doing the right thing. If I was in there, I'd do exactly the same thing. Get on top of it early on and try and kind of halt any speculation. Although, I would be hugely disappointed as an ex-journalist if anyone printed the name of the positive players anywhere. It would be a new low on a list of lows throughout this whole crisis for the British media, to be honest. So
it seems to be. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, could you see this going? I don't think that people are going to put lives at risk, but you're almost taking it to a point a bit like with children and chickenpox, where you have a party and all the children get the chickenpox. If you had one player at a club who was tested positive, you could end up with clubs trying to get other people infected potentially, so they don't lose players when we do restart. Yeah,
it's a football herd immunity kind of
exactly.
Prospect, isn't it? I mean, it's very, very difficult. I mean, you'd like to think that professional footballers would be among the least at risk people in the country, really, given their how healthy they are and everything else. But you only have to look at Fabrice Muamba and people like that. Fit as a fiddle, but had an underlying health condition. We don't know how many players in the Premier League have got underlying health conditions. I'm sure there's players with asthma and conditions like that. So risky strategy. If anyone went for that, I'd be massively surprised.
Well, during the week, there was Troy Deeney that came out for Watford that said that his son had an underlying health condition. So, of course, that does put him at risk. I understand he's not even going to be going back to training. So there is that side of things as well. But what actually happens, say, for example, if there is multiple players from any one club, that are tested positive, do games get postponed? When are those games played? So there's lots of questions there.
I think the Bundesliga carried on, didn't they? They just said your players are essentially injured, you play on.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. And there's it doesn't help also with certain types on Twitter, Craig, like Matt Letizia. You got on a bit of verbal with him, didn't you, over the last 24 hours? Tell us more about that.
Yes, I did. So Matt Letizia put out, I'm sure it's pure coincidence, when the Premier League said they won't release details of who's tested positive, the very next day, 2 clubs come out and say it was their staff. Both clubs coincidentally flirting with relegation. Of course, we don't know who the second club is. We know the first club is ourselves. What was quite interesting as well in response to this was a Everton fan. So, of course, Everton aren't at risk of relegation. Asked if Southampton were in the same position, would you still be suspicious? And he said yes. And I just thought it was completely out of turn. At the end of the day, if a player, we don't want any of our players to contract coronavirus. I did make that point as well in a previous video that we did, Sam.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was a big fear, is that what, health forbid, if one of our players contracts it, what happens?
Yeah, very true. We've had a comment from Ben. It's saying expectation might be players being super fit, but they are also at their limits, i.e. race cars are more delicate than Land Rovers, which is a very good way to put it. It's something that's going to be very interesting. And if it does happen, do we know whether the whole neutral grounds thing is going to be a thing? Or because, Germany seem to be managing to do it in their own stadiums. We'll get onto what it's been like watching the Bundesliga and the different ways that they've tried to make it more attractive by putting, blow up dolls and cardboard cutouts in the stands and all sorts of things like that. It doesn't quite work for me. But yeah, I mean, Tony, what are your thoughts on playing at neutral venues if that is going to happen? Is that fair? Is that integrity in the Premier League?
Well, it's football. Is it fair? I'm not sure. It's not as entertaining, that's for sure. I watched a bit of the Bundesliga, turned it off. It kind of reminded me of like listening to or watching Kabaddi or something on Eurosport. It was just sort of this. You could hear some noise of some players shouting at each other. That was about it. Yeah, I didn't like it much really, but it's football, isn't it? And in the whole neutral venue thing, there was an article in I think it was the Mirror this weekend, and it said that they looked at the statistics of it in Germany, and if a game's going on, they reckon that if the home team is losing, on average 4 minutes is added to the end of a game. If the home team is winning, only 2 minutes is added at the end of a game. That's the statistic they reckon they run in Germany. So I think that does have a significance. It's wrong that that happens in a way, but it's true. And if you can't play half a season one way and half the season, well, less than half the season the other.
Yeah, it's not exactly been very good to watch on TV. Neil, have you caught much of the Bundesliga at all?
Not a single minute, Sam. No.
Do you like Kabaddi, Neil?
Yeah, back in the day, yeah. It was Kabaddi correspondent, yeah.
Channel 4 used to show it before Trans World Sport, I think. I used to love it. I mean, the only one thing I could say about watching these neutral games, a German football I've not got much of an interest in anyway. I could name a handful of teams, and obviously you've got your Bayerns and Borussia, etc. But yeah. One thing I could say is watching an AFC Bournemouth pre-season friendly, which I've done many a time on AFCBTV or before that Cherries player, Lomanga or whatever, where you've got, maybe 10 men and their dogs all standing by the side of the pitch. I still did have that excitement from seeing my team score. So maybe my judgment of it is slightly skewed because of the fact that I'm watching teams I don't really care about. Whereas, like if you're watching players that you know and love and they score a goal, no matter that there's not the crowd, which obviously it's going to take some of the excitement away. And part of me thinks, is it going to take away some of the motivation that the players got? Because I'm sure the crowd help them to run that 10% faster or whatever. But I still get a bit of excitement. And if it's the only excitement that we can get, then we might as well take it. But Paul, you're not overly convinced, are you?
I miss when I watch the Bundesliga or any of the pre-season matches. I get excited because it's Bournemouth for those games, but I do find the lack of crowd just takes away from the actual sort of spectacle of the game. I think maybe the Premier League should be talking to EA and getting the people who made FIFA to work out a way of using their AI from FIFA when the ball goes towards an opposition goal, get the crowd cheering, and just have some sort of artificial crowd noise just to make the game bearable to watch. I mean, they've already got the technology; it's there, and they've even got the chants in the latest version of FIFA. So you've got like your nonny chants and things like that. So why not just pump in whoever's the home team, give them the crowd noise.
And that's what David Cordell said. And there was a suggestion from Simon Kay on Twitter earlier in the week saying, maybe there could just be like a big Zoom where, Nonny is going Red Army, but Zoom is awful. 20 seconds later, we'll all respond. It will be garbled. It'll sound awful. So I don't think so. Neil, as a journalist, what's your opinion of the Sun newspaper?
I grew up reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in my book actually. I grew up reading The Sun and the Mirror. I used to get home from school and read The Sun and the Mirror on the toilet. For about an hour after school, and that's what got me into newspapers and wanting to be a journalist actually. But it's fair to say my opinion of many of the tabloids has changed. Not sure it's just because I'm out of the business or because I'm getting older and less tolerant and grumpy. But I've been absolutely disgusted with some of the coverage over the last 3 months or so, and before that as well. To be fair, I just think the newspapers completely missed the mood of the general public, and have done for a long time. So yeah, the Sun specifically, actually.
Yeah, so you went to toilet with the Sun. I won't ask you what you wiped your backside with, but anyway.
I didn't do what you were hoping I would do.
Yeah. So the only reason I say that is because there are numerous articles that are pumped out regularly. This was today's or a couple of days ago from the Sun. And I'll show you this live. Premier League fans face ballots to watch matches with clubs briefed on vastly reduced crowd. So this is a story from, quarter to 11 this morning, about football fans facing random ballots for match tickets due to the crisis. I mean, what kind of basis are they forming articles like these on? Because it seems to me that there have been so many pie-in-the-sky stories over the past sort of 2.5 months, including someone saying playing it in China, playing in Australia. So stories like this, whereabouts are they getting their sort of basis or their foundation from?
I mean, Dave Kidd wrote that, so you'd like to think that Dave's got reasonable sources. He's been around a long time. He's one of the more kind of renowned sports writers in the tabloid business. It's changed so much since the onset of digital, really, and social media. The stories used to be written to sell newspapers, and now they're written to garner clicks. So that's a very shareable story. It's a negative slant from the fans' point of view. It's going to spark a lot of debate. It's going to be very shareable. It's going to get people in a bit of a lather. So job done from their point of view. Where the info's coming from, I've no idea. But
I'm just quite surprised they didn't have the headline, "We've seen the blueprint for next season in the Premier League," and you wouldn't believe what's on it. And then just nothing else. Click. And it's interesting because the Telegraph are also put stories on now. What's your opinion on paywalls as well, Neil? Because the Echo's got some kind of subscription model now as well. Some newspapers have trialed it. There are some places like the Daily Mail, Mail Online, that's still a free for all. But it's laden with adverts and lots of affiliate links, etc. But what's your opinion on paywalled articles?
It's just 10 years too late, basically. If the problem was, I could use up a good hour, so I'm not gonna drone on too much. But the problem is they didn't balance the business model, newspapers 10 years ago, between print and digital. Digital 10 years ago, 12 years ago was a very, very new area in terms of monetizing it. And what they didn't do, what they did was they threw everything at digital and building an audience, which they had to do through giving away their content for nothing, and completely pushed the papers to one side, when actually the papers were still very, very profitable at that stage. So paywalls really should have come in when they first started trying to monetize digital. And I'm pretty sure that I think the standard of journalism generally 10 to 15 years ago was better across the board. Not just talking about the Echo or any other paper. Generally, it's the standards have gone down hugely in my estimation. So when you're trying to monetize digital content when standards have dropped so badly, and there's a general mistrust as well in the British media, it's just not going to work. They completely missed the boat with it. And I think if they'd done it 10 years ago, then it might have worked. I think it's a good idea. If you're giving away content, you need to monetize it. In the same way, you don't give your papers away for nothing unless you're a commuter free sheet, like the Metro or the Standard. They cocked it up basically. And there's no way back now, unfortunately.
The only reason I ask is because I saw a link on Twitter to the Telegraph, and that's behind a paywall, but shouldn't really be saying this, but when you load up the page, the whole article is there. And then after a second, it puts this thing on. But if you just press escape lots of times, that thing doesn't appear. So you can actually watch. So yeah, you can. I mean, look, I'll give you a demonstration right now live.
I've been doing it for a while.
Have you now?
Yeah, I've known about that for about a month or two now.
Oh, have you?
No, I have no idea about that. No, I have no idea.
This is a Telegraph article. Obviously, it's been cut off. But if you just check, I'll just refresh the page, and you can see the whole thing is there. But then it puts this start your free trial. So I'm going to refresh the page and just press escape. Oh, it didn't work that time, but the first time it did. There we go. And now I've got the whole article here that I can look through. And, you just think, my goodness, how are they not kind of realizing things like that? But the reason is there's some quite interesting stuff about the different stages of the coronavirus testing. And they've kind of put forward some dates that I think it was like June the 19th maybe, or June the 26th. And there's our 2 Premier League shareholder meetings this week, with a second video conference on Thursday to discuss the date when the season can restart. But yeah, like people like Matt Latiz have said, and lots of other fans on Twitter, it seems to be that the only real people complaining about it are the ones who are being threatened by relegation. But the Watford FC chairman, Craig, he came out and said, well, yeah, I do have a vested interest. I do not want us to go down.
Yeah, most definitely. And likewise, Max and Jeff will have exactly the same view, I'm sure. With regards to Matt Letizier's quote on Twitter, at the end of the day, we didn't want that to happen. It's something that just happened, and we have been quieter. The rest of the teams down there, Brighton have also been very vocal, and even looking across the leagues, Barnsley have also warned that they're not going to accept relegation to the EFL. You look down to League One. And there was a big part about Mark Palacios at Tranmere, and AFC Wimbledon actually threw it back and said, well, yeah, we have got vested interest. It's in our best interest if the season is cancelled and we stay up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely understand where Watford are coming from. It depends how they're going to, if, say, for example, the season can't be completed, how they're going to do it. If it's on a weighted points system, we stay up, West Ham go down. If it's on points per game, well, we know what the score's going to be there. But
yeah, we'll be going the wrong way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Remember, if you're watching tonight and want to take part, it is an open panel. Therefore, go to afcbpodcast.com/panel. That will connect you straight up to this room. All you got to do is just make sure you got your earphones in, and then we'll let you in to talk about AFC Bournemouth. Cannot wait to hear from you. So go to afcbpodcast.com/panel. The resumption of the season, Tony, it's going to be an interesting one with the regular testing, and it could be one of these things that starts and then stops again, in which case it puts enormous pressure on the first round of games, doesn't it? Whenever that will happen, because we're in a situation where we could win, and if the season is then curtailed because of a second wave, we might have enough points to actually survive on unweighted or weighted.
Yeah, I think we're in a unique position, an interesting position in that we can watch, can't we, what's going on with Germany. And if there's any other leagues that are due to start before us, what is likely to happen. I think that will tell us a lot of stories, really. If anything happens elsewhere, we'll probably end up doing the same kind of thing. I feel that if it does start, I think there'll be protocols in place to make sure it doesn't stop. I think they'll make sure they're in a place where starting is safe as they feel safe needs to be, and they will make sure that there is no way, even if you've got to have a second 11, I don't know, but no way. I just can't see it stopping and starting at all. It'll start and they'll finish it one way or another.
Well, there's a lot of transfer talk. So, later on we'll talk about the players that you think might be here next season and the ones you don't think will be. One of the people who is not here tonight is Brett Pittman. Brad, he's here tomorrow. Unfortunately, he forgot, and that's all there is. So if you want to watch Brett, come on the channel, and also we're on Facebook as well, facebook.com/AFCB podcast. Neil, a message for you from David Cordell. Who's the better journalist?
He's probably watching, actually.
Yeah, quite possibly. He was yesterday.
I may be watching.
Yeah.
I learned. I ended up being his boss, obviously, in the end. Quite some time, but I learned pretty much everything that I know about sports writing from him. So Neil Parrott all day.
Oh, good stuff. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? And if I presume you've taken a lot of what you did at the Echo into your freelance stuff.
Yeah, I'm still writing. So I'm a copywriter predominantly, but I dabble in a bit of web design and a bit of marketing at a broader level. So that's kind of what I'm doing. Really, it's boring, to be honest, in terms of talking about it on a podcast. But and obviously did the book, and then there may be another book at some point potentially. You got me thinking about that last time I was on. So. We'll see. But still lucky to be writing predominantly and making a living out of it. So all good.
Good stuff. We've got another fan who's just entered the room. We've got Thomas Godfrey. Thomas, how are you, mate?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, it's lovely to see you all on the podcast. How is everyone doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Are you missing the football?
I am missing the football immeasurably. I have been having every essence, every ounce of live football that I've been able to get my hands on over the last month and a half or 2 months. I've been clutching at it with all I've got. Belarus, Germany, Japan, where they had the bizarre dolls in the crowd. I have taken every ounce of live football. I've got behind teams. I've got behind Islok in Belarus and said, come on, boys. I'm craving live football. That's how much live football has meant. So I'm glad the Bundesliga is back. Up the Bayer Leverkusen. They're have in the Bundesliga. So far doing very well, 2 out of 2. I mean, just a couple of points coming back, dragging this football discussion back from Belarus and Germany, back to Bournemouth, back to the team we all adore and support. Just a couple of questions is, knowing what we know now about the transfer market and how that's going to be shaped in the summer, would you have taken the £25 million offer from Manchester United in January for Joshua King?
Oh. That's a great question. You know what, Tony? I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to pass that one to you. What a great question, Thomas. This is great.
That is an incredible question, Thomas. Yes, because I think we are going to lose him in the summer. So I would. Thomas, I've got to ask, are you calling from Australia?
I am not. No, I'm calling from Bournemouth.
On my screen, you're upside down. Am I the only one who sees Thomas upside down?
No,
Yeah,
he's
he's
all right.
way up for me.
I'll screenshot this and I'll send it.
Sorry. So Neil, when Tony gave that reaction, you balked at what he said a little bit.
25 million.
I think it was 25. I mean, probably you're more in the know than I am.
No, I wasn't questioning. I wasn't questioning the price. I was questioning Tony's answer. Actually, I'm surprised that 25 million is not. It's worth a bit more than that, Tony. Isn't it?
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
In today's market, I mean, prices today, which should,
I'd be interested to know what if he does go, what we get for him in the summer. I suppose it wasn't.
Huddersfield got something, was it 5.5 million for Aaron Moy? And at the end of last season, you'd have snapped him up for 15, 20 million if you could. Yeah. But Huddersfield's small club, relegated, the player value depreciated because they needed the money, especially under new ownership. So suddenly he was worth a lot less and they were willing to accept a lower offer from Brighton. And I'm worried the same will happen, especially with clubs not having the revenue. Man United posted a loss for the last quarter, especially with clubs not having the money to buy players for a huge amount. Bournemouth need the money. They'll need the money even more if they go down, and the parachute payment won't last as long. So I think we would get only maybe 12 to 15 million for him, and that's not a number which I would have said in January. I say he was worth at least triple that.
Yeah, Thomas, can we get you on the podcast every week?
If you want.
But Paul,
honest, I have got nothing better to do right now.
That's good. But Paul, didn't you say something about? Football Twitter at the most times is unreliable. But there was something that you saw earlier with regards to Josh King, which made you, which kind of pricked your ears up a little bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a post that somebody put on again, like you say, it could have been somebody having a laugh. You just don't know that Josh King changed his agent to be a mate of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So if that's true, that could spell the end for Josh with us. But a bit like Tony, I think you can't really take the 25 million with forwards. I think if it was a midfielder, you probably could. We just don't have the strength up front to let anyone go.
So which players have we got expiring, whose contracts are expiring then at the end of this season?
Jordon Ibe, Fraser.
Charlie Daniels.
Charlie.
Andrew, I think Sermon's contract might be up.
Yeah. But Josh King, how many years has he got left then?
Good question.
Not too sure. But 25 million, I think. I mean, in hindsight, it's no, I would say, we hold on to him. I would say we hold on to him, Thomas. So I probably disagree with Tony there. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And we could have done many things, or not signed certain players, which we won't mention anyone that had his hair cut illegally. But difficult. Craig, who do you think's going to go at the end of the season?
I think Ryan Fraser's a dead cert. I think that's already everybody knows about that. I think Josh King will go. I've just done a quick Google search. He's only got a year left on a 4-year contract he signed in 2017. Yeah. So going back to the previous question, I think if we had sold him in the summer just gone, before this even happened, I think if we accepted 25 million, I think it'd be too low for a player of Josh King's standard. I think we'd be probably looking, with the players that did move in the summer, 35, 40 million would be a bit more sensible. But I do agree with Thomas. If we do go down, that value is going to depreciate a lot. Of course, with the current situation as well, I think we'd be lucky to get 25 million.
Yeah, interesting. And what was your next question there, Thomas, as well?
Well, I was going to say if David Brooks, Josh King, Nathan Ake, who I don't think we'll hold on to if we go down, if these players do leave, what players would you look at from the Championship to immediately sign to replace them? Assuming next year, obviously, if we're in the Championship, it's a big if. I hope we're not. Obviously, who do you target from that league to immediately propel us back into the top flight?
I think there's one player that jumps to mind for me. And playing for QPR, of course, Mark Pugh's there, but there's Eze. and when I've seen him, has been fantastic. He's a really, really good player. I believe Spurs are after him as well, so that might make it a bit difficult for us. But I think he would fit into, and he's the sort of player that is in the Eddie Howe mould as well. He seems very grounded chap from what I've seen. So yeah, I would certainly go for him to replace Brooks, which I agree with you, Thomas. I think we're not going to be able to keep hold of if the worst does happen.
And Neil, Eddie Howe's loyal. I mean, whilst some players would expect to go one way or the other, Eddie Howe seems to be, one of the more loyal characters, of course. And personally, if we went down, I don't think he would go. But have you got any thoughts on what he might possibly do or not do?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I think I've probably been saying for the last 3 or 4 years, will this be the summer that he goes, or when's he going to get to a point where he feels like he's got to take a step upwards, if you like. I don't mean to be sort of disrespectful to obviously the supporters that are on the podcast, but there are clubs that he could make a step up to. Clearly, I think, although perhaps the top 6 or 7 maybe that's passed him by now. I'm not sure. You kind of get the impression that his stock was probably higher, 2 or 3 years ago, I think, in regards to a top 6, top 7 job. I don't know. It's difficult to know. It's difficult with Eddie because he didn't want to go before, but felt that the whole lack of ambition accusation that he was worried that was going to be thrown at him, that kind of was a bit of a tipping point for him, I think, when he went to Burnley. Whether he cares about that now so much, I'm not so sure. He's older, a bit wiser. Obviously, he's had some trauma losing his mum, which was a key moment in his life in terms of where he wants to be, and obviously he's got 3 kids now as well. So things are very, very different for him. So I'm in agreement. I think he'll stay. I can't see him. I think as long as Maxim Deming's there, I think he's not going anywhere.
And he's got a lot of experience of obviously getting promotion throughout the leagues, and he's got experience of nurturing players and getting them up to standard. Ryan Fraser, Simon Francis, Charlie Daniels, Steve Cook. These are all players that we weren't sure whether they could step up. But also we've got to sort of remember that whilst Frano may be in the twilight of his career, in the Premier League, it's going to be harder and harder for him to do a job. In the Championship, it might just sort of be his level. So, he might be able to have a good season, but, we've got to be positive. Thomas, before you go, because we're going to invite someone else in, are we going to do it? And if we do, what are the matches that you're targeting as getting the sort of 9 or 10 points that we need?
I think Southampton is probably going to be a huge game, but I think it will ultimately end up being dependent on how much of the league is completed. If we finish the league, if we finish all 38 games, and I think if we do finish all 38 games, it will be those home matches that we really have to target. Even without the fans, Dean Court is a very weird stadium to come to because it's tiny. Realistically, it is a League One ground. It was built for a team in League One. It was built for a team that was in League One until very recently in history footballing terms. So I think we have to target the games where we can use the awkwardness of our ground to our advantage. Yeah,
good stuff. How do we get hold of you, Thomas? Are you on Twitter or Facebook or anything?
Yeah, I'm at Twitter at Thomas Godfrey UK. You can find me on there with mostly good opinions, I hope, about football and other things. So yeah, no.
We'll if we're not following you, we will do, and then we'll tap you up for future pods. But Thomas, thank you very much for coming on, mate. And it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. So what a star. And we'll have him on again. So this opens up another spot because we can have a maximum of 6. AFCBpodcast.com/panel if you want to get involved. Someone on chat has mentioned Ryan Fraser. I'll come to Paul on this. He's had a disappointing season. Kirk has said to leave us for nothing is poor, as we gave him his career. What are your thoughts on this season? Because he hasn't been great. And then he came up with that extraordinary interview with Chris Temple, I think, where he sort of said, well, no, I haven't really been trying that hard.
Yeah, I was disappointed at the time. with his words, but then actually having had quite a bit of time to think about it since, I just think he's really honest, and and he's kind of just he's annoyed a lot of people because he's been honest, and you can't have it both ways. You can't have an honest player and then a player that's sort of also sort of good for the fans, because he's if he said he wanted to stay and then he disappeared the next week, you'd be even more annoyed at him, I think. But generally speaking, have we made him? No, I don't think we have. I think he's made himself. I think he's been down in the lower leagues. He's worked hard. He's had a great season last season. And as you say, this year has been disappointing, whether it's because his head was turned or whether he just assumed that him and Callum would hit the ground running this season and carry on. I don't know. It's a difficult one to put your finger on, but I do think that, we should all be thankful for what he's done for us, especially last season. And I think we should all wish him well.
And Crystal Palace, though, has been a club that he's been mooted with Tony, which is a bit of an odd. I mean, I would say that there's undoubtedly clubs that are bigger than us in the Premier League, i.e. most of them, but Crystal Palace are not that high up the table when you're looking at size of club. So it seems like a bit of a sideways move.
Yeah, I don't think that's where. I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't think that's where Ryan would want to go. I mean, haggling over the contract, saying that he wants to leave, he must be thinking of a very different type of move than Crystal Palace, I would imagine. And I expect there'll be a line of people who would happily take a chance on him. He's leaving us on a free, so it's contract costs. You probably have to be a Premier League club, though, I would imagine. So yeah, I can't imagine Crystal Palace is the place for him. No,
that's right. So Steve Hensman, I presume you're being ironic when you say let's get Lee Tomlin back, but yeah, he didn't have the best experience. And there are certain players, Craig, I'll come to you on this, that don't necessarily fit Eddie Howe's mould, and they don't really see the light of day. Wana Turbe, I would say Jordon Ibe. I mean, there's a whole list of them that haven't worked out, and that's there are numerous players and even current squad members that are always referenced when we're talking about Eddie Howe's track record, and people talk about the Frasers and the Brooks and the Arters and those kind of signings that have hit the ground running, and then there are names like Lee Tomlin that sort of get mentioned. Why do you think these players just don't fit in?
I think it's really, in a way, it's how they integrate with the rest of the team, how hard they work in training. There's been lots of problems with Jordon Ibe, and his conduct off the field. When on it, he's a frustrating player, and I know Eddie's probably saying the same as what I do when I watch him, which is pass. What are you doing? There's better options around, and I honestly think it's that the players that. They're hard-working players. A lot of them have been with us since League One and worked their way up the leagues. And it's the type of mould, the ones that are willing to get stuck in. And sometimes when we're at this level that we're at now, and we bring players in, sometimes they are going to be personalities that aren't going to work as hard, that think maybe that they've made it.
Yeah. And it's funny you talking about work rate, because Chris Hubble said, let's get Matt Ritchie back, who we would absolutely love, of course. But
I'd take him in a heartbeat.
Easily. I mean, it won't happen, but I can't imagine it happening. Daniel commented about looking about maybe getting Lallana in on a free and Harry Wilson for 25 million. Ivan Toney as well. Harry Wilson, Paul, bit of an odd one, because he's not had a great season bowler missions, but he's scored a hell of a lot of goals.
Yeah, he's a free kick specialist. He's a player who he's been hit and miss, I think, this season. Occasionally he'll show some brilliance, and then occasionally he won't track back, and he looks like he's sort of thrown his arms up in the air and can't be bothered. But I think it's passion, but I think it's it needs to be harnessed in a different way.
And and Mark Collins says about getting Fletch back in the Championship, which just imagine that. But Neil, that kind of I think Tommy Elphick described the Championship winning side, well, League One into the Championship, as a team of misfits that were all moulded, together to form this great side. And Mark, as much as that is like funny, like you're mentioning Fletch, it's not necessarily the technical quality, but it's the mentality that we need, I think. And players of that kind of psychological mould, perhaps maybe what we need if we were to get relegated. Yeah,
it was the Tommy comment. He's made that comment on more than one occasion, actually, about them being a bunch of misfits, and I never really got that. For me, that Championship team, in the team that came up from League One, was a pretty perfectly formed outfit for me, and I think they proved that. I guess they kind of came from different backgrounds and things like that, and they all had their own story to tell, is perhaps what he was getting at. But yeah, going back to Fletch, that kind of talismanic figure, I think you definitely need it. You need somebody like that in every league beneath the Premier League, actually. And get Tommy Elphick back. Why not? If they do happen to drop, I'm sure he'd come back. I know he's way too far north than he'd like to be. I know that for a fact. So
he's. The interview with him was really candid, and I was quite surprised the way he revealed certain bits of information. He said, since leaving Bournemouth, in terms of training, he's never got what he's needed, and those were his words. And quite surprising, given he's currently at Huddersfield, and he's been at Villa, and there's a big fan base at both of those clubs, and he's saying that, and you're an existing player, and you're kind of almost dissing your manager by saying that, and their coaching staff. But a lot of people have praised the sort of training techniques. So I think he would come back in a heartbeat. And Mark Collins, who said Brett Pitman, will have him tomorrow, and Pitman, he knows where the goal is. And Tony, Brett Pitman, obviously having him tomorrow. Were you disappointed that he didn't really get a go in the Premier League?
Yeah, of course I was. I mean, I was disappointed he didn't. I was disappointed that Jan didn't. I was disappointed that Fletch didn't get a game with the Championship. I mean, but Eddie makes difficult decisions, doesn't he? Quite well. He tries not to bring. It's funny, really, because I think Neil said it before. He tries not to use, sentiment doesn't come into it. But yet he seems like, when he speaks about the past, a sentimental guy. So he can hold these players in great regard, but he knows what tools he needs going forward. So yes, I was sad that Pitman didn't get that chance. However, Eddie had a different plan, didn't he? He thought that we'd have to play differently, and Brett perhaps wasn't what he was looking for.
This has very much been a worst case scenario chat at numerous points of this show, where we're thinking the worst, that we'll go down to the Championship. Hopefully we'll survive, and I think we've got enough quality on the pitch to survive, and we've got a lot of players that have got have to prove themselves still, not least players like Dom Solanke. Wing has left a comment saying we've paid loads to Liverpool for what he deems substandard players, and he thinks that's Eddie's biggest Achilles heel. Now, you could argue that we spent money on Brad Smith, Jordon Ibe, Dom Solanke, and haven't quite worked. But I've always felt as though Dom Solanke, there is something there. And Craig, we've seen flashes in matches that are usually sort of unimportant, and sometimes he dallies on the ball and takes one touch too many when he should distribute or get a shot away quicker. What have your thoughts been of Dom this season?
He's a frustrating player. But there is talent there, as he has proved in the past. But I think he's one for the future. Personally, I think maybe it's a little bit too early for him. He needs Eddie to put his arm around him and get him working on hitting the target first time. But yeah, I think there's a good player. He will do very well. I think, yes, he would do very, very well in the Championship, but hopefully that's not where we're going. So, I think he just a little bit more nurturing, but he will need to step up to the plate next season, because be it if we stay up or go down, I think we are going to struggle to keep hold of King.
Yeah, and Tony, tell us about this Last Dance thing that you've been watching on Netflix, and what kind of you've sort of got an AFC Bournemouth thought process behind it, haven't you? Tell us a little bit more about that. Was it a basketball thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Chicago Bulls. So it's Michael Jordan's. I don't know if anyone else in the panel seen it.
Yeah, fantastic.
It is really, really good. It's one of the best sports documentaries I've ever seen. I had a fleeting interest in basketball. I remember back in the 90s, actually. So I sort of tuned in for that reason, but it kept me because it is so good. It used footage from back in 1998 and previous to that, and there's a lot of retrospective interviewing going on. But the thing that struck me, and I sort of joined up thinking to what we've been talking about, is near the end of that, and it's not a spoiler, hopefully, because this is history. I'm not giving away the end of a fairy tale. At the end of it, the team have got to decide really who's staying, and the coach has got to decide whether he wants to stay and have another go. And he decides not to, and I think by him deciding not to, the band is broken. None of the players want to carry on, and it's like that's the end of that project. And I do worry. It's a conversation we were having a little while back. That when I think about Eddie, and I think Eddie's driven by projects, and if the band was broken, if he lost too many of those players, whether he'd have the appetite to put a new band together. And it reminds me of a bit in Neil's book where Sean O'Driscoll, and there were other things going on. It was around the Darren Anderton sale, and he left, and he'd almost had his legs cut off in all the players that had been sold that previous season. And I wonder if Sean, in that respect, decided that to put the band back together, to start all over again, this project was probably a bit too much. So that's what I was thinking about Eddie, whether Eddie would, despite his love for Bournemouth, if he lost all the tools, would he want to go and find them all again and put it all back together again?
Yeah, Neil, he's got quite a hunger though, Eddie, hasn't he?
He has, and he's still young as well. And I think that hunger's still there at Bournemouth as well. I don't think he's been through quite enough in footballing terms to say, I've not got the energy for this anymore. It's time for a new challenge. I still think that there's a few more chapters in his Bournemouth story to write, and it's. I think maybe he'd even relish the challenge actually of rebuilding again. Maybe there's I think he'd look at it as potentially a positive. Maybe there's a few guys in that squad that he'd like to move on, and if he could and bring in some new faces, then I think he'd see that as a challenge. It's whether he can bring in the type of people that he can mould. I think we touched on it before that the players that he gets the best out of are the ones that come in as the rough diamonds that he can mould. And I think maybe the problem with players like Dom Solanke and Jordon Ibe, who we've mentioned, is that they're not really rough diamonds. They've come through youth setups at huge clubs, and perhaps there's a little bit of them thinking they're already the finished article. I'm not sure, but they're not the type of players that he can kind of mould into players that suit him and suit the way that he likes his teams to play. And if he could do that by chipping a few out and bringing a few in, then he would very much see that as a positive, I think.
You get the impression that... Go on, Neil. Sorry, Craig.
I think he'll relish the opportunity. We've already seen Lloyd Kelly come into this team. All right, yes, he hasn't played. However, he's a very, very good player from Bristol City. Did very well for them. Jack Stacey's, what I've seen him, he is a rough diamond, but there's a lot of quality there. He had a very, very good season for Luton the previous year. So there's a lot, and I can see that he'll only want to bring those players on further, mould those. So I think, I agree with you, Neil, that there's a lot of chapters still to write in Eddie's story here.
I think it's worth saying as well, actually, that there's a lot of players in the youth setup as well that he'll be thinking, I can make a player out of him. Jack Simpson's a case in point, who's come through the setup and obviously has made the step up already, but is still, still very obviously a long way from being the finished article. But and being a defender as well. I think Eddie would be relishing the opportunity to work more with him and hopefully turning him into a fantastic player. And there's more coming through as well. So and you guys will know that being all over the the youth setup as well, as I'm sure you are.
Yeah,
there's some really, really handy looking players coming through, and he loves all that. He worked in the youth setup before, and he absolutely loved it. And if he hadn't have been made manager when he was, and under the circumstances that he was, he probably would have carried on in that kind of role, bringing youth players through, because I really think he's got a passion for that. And I think he'd struggle to walk away from that, given the quality of players that are in that setup that are coming through.
I think having waited so long. Sorry,
go on,
Craig. Having waited so long for the new training facility, I can't see him going anywhere for at least a season or two after that's completed. He's had a full hand in setting that up and designing it and everything else. So I think he'll stay if he's not pushed.
Look at the two goalkeepers that come through the youth setup as well, Travers and Ramsdale. Both fantastic. Travers in that Spurs game, I was watching it back the other day, and somebody actually said that it was the best debut by a goalkeeper. So, there's a lot of quality there, and to have two very, very good goalkeepers that come through the youth system,
Yeah, and I think the Championship, it's kind of nice. You get that. Whilst they do have the international breaks, I think the frustration with the Premier League is quite often there are so long breaks, and Eddie just wants. He said when there's a loss and you got to dwell over it over an international weekend, it's horrible. I think League One would probably suit him, best really, because you get no breaks at all. Like in terms of international breaks, if they could kind of have that kind of 46 matches in the Premier League, I'm sure he'd go for it. But we've had a couple more questions. We'll wrap up very soon. One of which is Neil, whether you've got any insight on this or not. David Cordell said, "Will Max sell the club, and to whom?" And it's interesting he asks that because rumours on Twitter about Bournemouth coming close to a Saudi takeover in January that's been doing the rounds recently on Twitter. But do you know anything more about that?
I'm out of the loop, Sam, to be honest, these days on stuff that deep at boardroom level. I kind of hear as much as you guys, really. People forget he's been around a while now, Max. And it's been pretty much success all the way. And it's kind of a question again, really, of does he think there's some more chapters for him to write as the club's owner, or is he looking for a new challenge? I don't really know enough about him. We never really got to grips with him as a person and as a businessman and an entrepreneur, and kind of how he is really, and whether he would be the sort of person that would get to a point where he would go, I'm done here. It's time for something else. I need to challenge myself with something else. I think it's similar situation to Eddie. I think as long as Max is there, Eddie's there, and I think actually it's vice versa as well. I think they're very, very close, and Jason would come under that kind of trio as well. They're very, very close, and I think it would be a case if one went, then as Tony was saying, the band gets broken up.
Okay, so you've not really liaised much with Max, but what about Brett Pitman? Have you with him at all?
No, I never had a huge amount to do with Brett, actually. I had a good relationship with sort of 5-6 of the squad players around the time when he was before he went to Bristol City and when he came back. You're looking for some advice on how to question him, aren't you? Yeah,
well, we've got him tomorrow, and he doesn't seem to be amazingly vocal. But then there are people in the squad now, like Artur Boruc. You don't hear sort of many interviews from people like him. But when he does, it's great to hear from him. But it's clear that he's not particularly happy with doing sort of media stuff. So we were quite surprised. And Kelly Summers, who we chatted to yesterday, he said, she was surprised that he agreed to it. So we're just wondering.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised. He's a lovely lad, but he's very, very relaxed, and he likes what he likes, and what he doesn't like, he won't do. So he's quite strong-willed, strong-minded. as well. So I was quite surprised when you said you were having him on. Actually, it'd be really good. I mean, he's older and wiser now, and vastly more experienced as well. So be really, really interesting to see what he's got to say. Actually, because even when I was at the Echo, we didn't do a huge amount with him really. Neil had a really good relationship with him from his days coming through the younger setup. But the rest of us, really, he was a little bit wary, I think, of the rest of us. At the time, he used to do a fair bit with Neil, or he would do stuff with Neil when he was asked. But the rest of us, he would give us a little bit of a wide berth. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what he's got to say. So, and the whole Pompey thing as well, be interesting with what's gone on there. I know there's been a few falling outs there with Jacket and some of the other staff. So
yeah, he was here earlier in the season doing some kind of work with the youth, and he's been a bit of an enigma because he scored goals throughout our rise. I really wish he could have had some minutes in the Premier League. He didn't. But yeah, intrigued on what he's got to say. Marvin Bartley, who came on the podcast as well, called him Grumpy Guts. Obviously, there are numerous things that we might want to talk about, including, was it him and Max Gradle that were fighting off for taking a penalty? Was it? Yeah. Do you remember that, Mr. Tigz?
I do. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
And Paul, can you remember who actually won the who actually won the argument and took the penalty?
I thought Gradle did.
Yeah. Please tell me he scored, because that's the worst when they don't, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure he did, but I'm trying to rack my brains. But I think it was an interesting moment. I know Brett was throwing his toys out the pram and gesticulating over at the bench and saying, I should be the one taking it. And it went on for it felt like 5 minutes. It must have probably been about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It was very funny at the time. But I wonder if Brett might have watched some of your other podcasts with some of his old teammates and just felt like reminiscing.
Yeah, well, I hope so, because a lot of them have been very honest so far, and Matt Ritchie was brilliant. So yeah, we're really looking forward to having him on. So that is on the channel tomorrow evening. Now, we've had a comment from Joe, said, "What's the latest on the training ground?" Well, I know that Buckingham Group have been officially confirmed as the contractors now. We've been over and done a number of videos, so we'll hopefully go over there soon. I'll do some exercise or something. Am I allowed to do that and take my camera with me? I don't know, but we'll see if there's anything sort of moved on. But guys, thank you so much for your input tonight. Neil, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure. No, it's really nice to come on again. Enjoyed it last time, enjoyed it this time. So thanks for having me.
Good man. Also, Mr. Tigz, really enjoyed your input today.
Thank you, buddy, and you enjoyed it.
Good stuff. Paul Kenward, once again, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you, PK, outside the stadium very soon.
Well, you say very soon, but it might be without being able to get into the ground. But we can meet up outside with 2 meter distance, if you like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not that would be encouraged. And also Craig Beazley as well. Thanks so much for coming on, buddy.
Cheers, Sam. Thank you. Cheers, guys.
And I gather we'll be graced with your presence, Craig, for an interview very soon. We won't say who, but you're going to be on in the next week or so, aren't you?
Yes, will be.
Good man. Right, looking forward to it. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because it really helps us. And also, if you're still watching this now, which many people are, hit the like button, because it really helps the YouTube algorithm and stuff. I don't really know how it works, but that's what everyone else says, so that's what you should do for us. And also, we'll try to do one of these fan chats again regularly, but we've got players coming up who you'll be really interested in hearing from. Some from the noughties, we've got some from the championship season, also standout players from the 80s as well. So really cannot wait to be chatting to them. But for now, up the cherries, and we'll see you in the next video. See you, team. Take care. Back in the day!